With time running out on their year, the New York Rangers grabbed some Russian rocket fuel to make a push for the postseason. By the 2001 season, the Pavel Bure experiment in South Florida had run its course. By no fault of his own, considering Bure had extended his Canuck reputation as one of the most prolific scorers in hockey history, winning back-to-back Rocket Richard trophies, as well as accounting for an NHL modern-day record, scoring 29.5% of Florida's goals in the 2000 season. But regardless of Bure's individual success and electric scoring, it didn't lead to much team success, with only 4 playoff games to show for his tenure. And with the new sheriff in town, the cranky Mike Keenan, the decision was made to sell off their highly productive, yet highly expensive superstar. Expensive as in a $9.5 million salary for the next 2 seasons and a $10.5 million salary in 2004-2005. That would make him a top 12 paid player in today's salary structure. Forget about 25 years ago. Not many franchises could afford such a contract, even for someone as great as Pavel Bure. Enter your New York Rangers. The Rangers by March of 2002 were on the cusp of missing the playoffs for the 5th straight season. With having one of the highest payrolls in hockey during this time, the franchise consistently felt the pressure to make the postseason to justify the spending, thus compounding a vicious cycle of adding more expensive veterans to win, instead of taking a step back to draft and develop a winning core. Continuing in Neil Smith's tradition of bringing in older players such as Pat LaFontaine, Kevin Stevens, Mike Keane, and Valerie Kamensky, Rangers general manager Glenn Sather had no problem throwing around the Garden's deep pockets to try and buy their way back into the playoffs. So on March 18, 2002, 2 points behind the Montreal Canadiens for the final Eastern Conference playoff spot, the Russian Rocket would launch over 1,100 miles north, safely landing at Madison Square Garden, and on the same line as Eric Lindros. If you haven't already, you may want more context in the first part of this season and check out a previous video I made featuring Eric Lindros' arrival to New York and his time with the Fly Line. Continuing their trend of adding expensive stars, the Rangers traded for Eric Lindros after holding out a year in Philadelphia and paired him with the previously signed Theo Fleury along with young home-ground winger Mike York. Fast forward a few roller coaster months, young and homegrown went out the door as Mike York was shipped to the Edmonton Oilers for Tom Poti, and Glenn Sather added another expensive star to the collection with Pavel Bure. So in a matter of months, the Rangers acquired 2 still productive 1990s hockey icons. It was definitely wild times in Times Square. Along with Bure, the Rangers also received a second-round pick and sent in a package defenseman Igor Ulanov, Philip Novak, their first and second round picks from the current year's draft, along with a 4th round pick the following season. He's a constant threat, Rangers general manager Glenn Sather said of Pavel Bure. He's someone who can score anytime he gets the puck on his stick. He's an artist. He's a superstar.
Frankly, a superstar of Pavel Bure's ilk at this time did not make sense for our hockey club. With this trade, we have acquired 4 quality assets that we feel will help our club going forward. But perhaps more importantly, what it does is give us the flexibility to address many more of those needs over the coming months, the entry draft, into next season and beyond.
As we look at the future in the context of our team and how Pavel fits in at this time, it's more suitable for us to make this decision.
You know, the last 2 years we haven't been able to achieve it all. We've been awful, and we need to get better. We need to win hockey games. And I think if we deliver a product where we win more games than we lose and we're competitive and we're competing for playoff spots and hopefully a lot more, then I think our fans will be fine.
Keenan would also add, it's a difficult trade. The key was that even with Pavel winning the Rocket Richard trophy, the team still couldn't win enough games. Price tag too rich not to win in Florida, New York added arguably the greatest goal scorer of his generation and had little time to waste if they wanted to make the playoffs. Head coach Ron Lowe, for at least the first game, decided to stack the top line with Theo Fleury and Pavel Bure with the Big E up the middle. Bure didn't get much time to adjust to the bright lights, shooting out of the gate skating a staggering 28 minutes. But unfortunately, the Rangers lost in his debut to his former Canucks club. And in case you had any doubt, of course he would score in his first game as a New York Ranger.
Well, I feel pretty good, Obviously, I'm not satisfied we lost, but we had lots of chances, and we have to finish our chances. We have to finish off. Well, it was great emotion. It's the first game as a Ranger at home, and he's scoring the first goal, and I just felt really great.
The following game, some line shuffling would take place as Matthew Barnaby slotted next to Lindros and Bure, with great results as the Rangers got a much-needed win and offensive jolt against the Senators, with both Lindros and Bure scoring. However, Pavel Bure's boost could not combat the Rangers' inconsistency that plagued them all year, as the Blue Shirts dropped the next 3 games, putting a damper on their postseason hopes. To their credit, Lindros and Bure kept scoring even with the losses, combining for 4 goals, with Lindros skating nearly 24 minutes and Bure close to 26 minutes a night. Following a 3-game losing streak, Ron Lowe decided to shake up his top line once again, still keeping together the dream combo of Lindros and Bure, but rotating the other wing, from Fleury to Barnaby, and this time another Glenn Sather trade deadline addition, Martin Rucinsky. The 30-year-old veteran was acquired from the Dallas Stars for 21-year-old former 7th overall pick Manny Malhotra, in another Glenn Sather win-now transaction. Funny enough, Sather traded away a young Rucinsky 10 years earlier to the Nordiques, after only suiting up for 2 games in Edmonton. The Czech native was also unfortunately familiar with Eric Lindros in his youth, having been run over and hospitalized by the E-Train in the 1991 Canada Cup. The new ingredient on the first line of speed and shooting really complemented Lindros and Bure, and the trio would absolutely light up the opposition to end the season. Starting with Pavel Bure's return to Florida, the new-look trio combined for 4 goals and 6 points and 12 shots, with Eric Lindros skating 25 minutes and Bure just a few seconds behind him. Staying in Florida, the Rangers won the next game in Tampa Bay, with once again the top line combining for 6 points. Pavel Bure continued his scoring spree, extending his streak to 4 games, scoring another 2 goals in a win against Toronto, where the first line combined for 7 points. Unfortunately, even with the Blue Shirts catching fire with a 5-game winning streak, and the Bure, Lindros, Rucinsky trio carrying the Rangers, the momentum and victories came too late, as the team was officially eliminated from the postseason for the 5th straight year. However, the chemistry of the first line, even in such a small sample size, really had MSG buzzing. Eric Lindros from the Pavel Bure trade on looked like the Legion of Doom Lindros, and showed the hot streak the fly line had early on was not an anomaly, scoring 9 goals and 16 points in 12 games. All in all, it was a successful comeback season for Lindros after a year off, continuing his streak since his debut as a teenager of over point-per-game seasons with 73 points in 72 games.
He stuffed it in off the pass from Rucinsky, and it's 4-1 Rangers.
When the play was set up to Bure, it was Rucinsky who set him up. And then it was Rucinsky who sets up Lindros. And everybody talks about Lindros and Bure, rightly so. But not enough people are talking about Rucinsky and what he's done, this being the 4th straight game playing on this line.
Martin Rucinsky scored 13 points in 15 games as a Ranger. But more specifically, since his promotion to the top line, he ended the year scoring 10 points in 7 games, including a 4-game, 2-point-per-game streak. Pretty wild production, considering his career seemed almost over, scoring only 9 points in the previous 32 games with the Dallas Stars. The real story in New York, besides the Rangers' playoff drought, was the insane scoring barrage by sniper Pavel Bure. It was great to see, considering Bure wasn't exactly the Russian Rocket of old to start the year in Florida. But those concerns got put to bed. Pavel Bure electrified as a Blue Shirt, scoring a staggering 12 goals in 12 games and 20 points while skating nearly 24 minutes a night to end the year. It was simply a dominant offensive stretch. And although disappointed, Ranger fans were salivating at the idea of an entire season with Pavel Bure on Broadway. as it almost seemed like a foregone conclusion that Adam Graves' all-time Rangers single-season goal record of 54 was about to be shattered. If only it were that easy, especially in this era of New York Rangers hockey. Over the summer, even with his proven chemistry on the first line, Rangers general manager Glenn Sather surprisingly decided not to retain pending UFA Martin Rucinsky. Eventually signing with the Blues for $1.7 million, it seemed odd to not keep that trio intact to start the 2002 season, especially considering they were already paying Lindros and Bure nearly $20 million. Another $1.7 seemed well worth the investment of proven production. Another potential head-scratcher was the new head coach. Ron Lowe was shown the door, and with the locker room full of veterans, including the newly signed expensive free agent Bobby Holik, and a franchise desperate to make the playoffs, the Rangers hired rookie head coach Bryan Trottier. Yes, that Bryan Trottier, Islanders legend with 6 Stanley Cup rings, but only 1 AHL season of head coaching experience. With the amount of money being spent and pressure to win, typically you don't want that left in the hands of a head coach with no NHL experience, regardless of his greatness as a player. And to handicap Bryan Trottier before the season even got underway, Pavel Bure suffered a knee injury in the preseason. Pavel Bure having knee issues sounded alarm bells, a lot like concussion issues with Eric Lindros. And while it ended up not being anything major, only costing Bure a few games to start the year, it highlighted just how fragile the team's top 2 stars were, and subsequently, their season could be. Pavel Bure scored in his season debut with 2 goals, because at this point it was shocking if he didn't score, and subsequently opened the year with a 3-game goal-scoring streak. With 7 goals in 9 October games, it seemed Pavel Bure could amazingly continue where he left off the previous season, even as he entered his 30s. However, while Bure seemed primed for another productive season, Eric Lindros did not. Whether it was a clash of styles with head coach Bryan Trottier, who would bench Lindros a few times early in the year, or he wasn't in the best shape as some speculated, no one could really pinpoint what was going on with the former dominant All-Star center. In fact, for the first time in his life, health wasn't a question for Eric Lindros, but his production was. Eric Lindros opened the year with only 13 points in the team's first 25 games. The Big East cold stretch rubbed off on Bure, who only recorded 4 points in 14 November games, showing for the first time as a Ranger an inability to generate offense. Bryan Trottier's Rangers barely hovered around 500 as it seemed another doomed season in New York. The rookie head coach split Lindros and paired Pavel Bure with Peter Nedved to try and spark the offense, with tremendous results including a hat trick against the Columbus Blue Jackets. What we didn't know at the time was Bure's first hat trick as a Ranger would be the final hat trick of his career, as a few days later the 31-year-old sniper suffered another, this time far more serious knee injury, which needed to be surgically repaired, sidelining him for 2.5 months. In an amazing testament to Pavel Bure's determination and work ethic, he later came back in what ended up being a disastrous season for New York, and scored 9 points in 12 games before having to shut it down once again, and this time, forever. His final goal came on a penalty shot, fittingly all alone against the netminder on essentially one leg with a tremendous deke for his 437th career goal. Almost as shocking as his sudden lack of scoring, Eric Lindros played a career-high 81 games, but this season signified the end of the legendary power forward's career as an impact player, with a career-low 53 points. It was rather unique seeing 2 iconic players who were polar opposites in playing style, yet mirror images in their legacies. Absolutely dominant forces hindered by their health, falling just short of hoisting the Stanley Cup, ended up on the same line together like a fantasy hockey team, and gave the hockey world the last glimpse of their greatness before it ended prematurely. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe for more line combo content.